The ship's instruments reported no disturbances, a comforting oversight that did little to quell the itch of anxiety gripping Mira. Yet as she peered into the abyss, she felt a primal urge to delve deeper, to unearth the guardians or evils hidden within the colorful veil of the nebula. It called to her, whispering tales of voyages past where explorers had met untimely fates in pursuit of hidden truths. What if the echoes of their struggles had left behind remnants, lurking within the folds of the dust and gas? In that moment, the very boundaries of her reality blurred, the history of the cosmos pressing upon her psyche. The ship, the crew, and the nebula seemed intertwined in a cosmic waltz, dancing on the precipice of knowledge and oblivion. Lieutenant Quinn stood at the confluence of fear and fascination, breathing in the cold steel of the ship while trying to grasp the intangible threads of mystery that spiraled into the darkness. Each revelation pushed her further into a chasm of wonder and terror, echoing the vastness that awaited beyond the stars. As the Eclipse prepared its engines for the journey home, Mira understood one truth. The whispers from the black might never completely fade. Chapter 2. The signal. 2 hours later, everything changed. The ship's AI seraph pinged loudly, drawing the attention of the crew. The once monotonous hum of the ship was now interrupted by an urgent alert flashing across the walls. The signal was faint at first, just a whisper, a series of rhythmic pulses, like a heartbeat. Mira's mind immediately shot to the worst-case scenarios. A distress call, an alien signal, or worse, a trap incoming signal. Seraph announced, frequency unidentifiable pattern consistent with organic communication. Organic. Mira's pulse quickened. The idea of an alien message was both exhilarating and terrifying. Was this the first contact humanity had been waiting for? Or something far more sinister? Captain Grant stepped forward, rooted to the command center, he said. Let's hear it. The crew gathered in the command center as the signal amplified, becoming louder, more distinct at first. It sounded like static. Then, just as Mira was about to ask if it was just interference, something clicked. It was words barely discernible, but undeniably their help-strapped the voice seemed to beg. Distorted and distant, the crew exchanged uneasy glances. Trapped. Who was it? Where were they? The voice continued, its tone growing more desperate. Findus the Black can't escape. Mira's hands trembled as she watched the data stream, trying to extract anything that could give them a location. But the more they tried to focus on the signal, the more fragmented it became. It was as though the signal itself was moving, fading in and out. We need to track this, Grant said, his voice firm, though Mira could hear the undercurrent of fear. Set course for the source. We're going in. Chapter 3. Into the Abyss. The Eclipse followed the erratic path of the signal into a region of space known as the Black Rift, a vast, unexplored stretch of dark void, devoid of stars or any celestial bodies. Even the most advanced telescopes had failed to pierce its depths, and most scientists believed it was just a dark patch of the galaxy, an area of no consequence. But Mira knew better now. Whatever this was, it wasn't natural. It was as though the Black Rift itself was alive, feeding off the ship's energy, growing stronger as they approached. They had entered the rift for only an hour when strange things began to happen. Lights flickered in the corridors, and the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Crew members complained of dizziness, headaches, and strange dreams. Mira herself couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her from the shadows. When they finally arrived at the center of the rift, the ship's sensors went wild. There in the blackness was a massive structure, an alien artifact, ancient and covered in shifting symbols, unlike anything humanity had ever seen, Captain. What is that? Mira whispered. Grant stood frozen, his expression unreadable. I don't know, but we need to find out. Chapter 4. The Artifact. The crew suited up and entered the airlock. Mira felt a sickening sense of foreboding as they approached the artifact, which loomed ahead like a dark, jagged mountain, its surface smooth and gleaming in the ship's lights. The closer they got, the more disorienting the air became, heavy as if the very atmosphere was warping around them. Keep your distance, Grant ordered, but his voice was strained. As they stepped closer, the signal began to pulse again, now louder than ever. It echoed through their comms, a continuous, maddening stream of pleas for help. But it wasn't just a voice anymore. It was a chorus. Dozens, hundreds, voices overlapping, pleading, screaming. Suddenly Mira froze. The voices, they were familiar. They were her own. Mira, Mira, help you strapped. A cold hand gripped her heart. She turned to look at the others. No one else seemed to hear it. "Mira?" said Lieutenant Rowan, her voice tight with fear. "You okay?" But Mira couldn't answer. The voices grew louder, their words distorted but unmistakable, and as she looked at the surface of the artifact, her stomach dropped. The symbols that had seemed alien before now seemed to change, shift, swirl, and reorganize. And then with a horrible clarity she realized the truth. It wasn't just a signal. It was a message from the past. A warning. The voices belonged to previous explorers, those who had come before them. The artifact wasn't a relic, it was a prison, a trap, and it was alive. Before she could warn the crew, the artifact's surface split open with a sickening sound, like 1,000 bones cracking at once. From within the opening, something dark, something vast poured out. It was not a creature. It was a presence, a shadow so deep that even the vacuum of space seemed to warp around it. It surrounded them, closing in on their minds, reaching into their souls. The voices screamed in unison, now a cacophony of madness. Join us. Chapter 5. The Escape. The crew scrambled for the airlock, terror flooding through them as the shadow pressed in from all sides. Mira felt her mind fracture, each voice from the artifact clawing at her consciousness. They were trying to take her, to pull her into the blackness of the rift, to become part of the endless swarm of lost souls that had already been consumed. "Get back to the ship," Grant shouted, his voice breaking. Mira's breath came in ragged gasps as she stumbled, barely able to keep her feet. The darkness was closing in, but she refused to give in. She couldn't let it win, not like the others. She reached the ship's airlock first, slamming her hand on the console, her pulse racing. The others were close behind, but as the door sealed, Mira heard one last scream. It was the voice of someone she loved, someone she knew. "Help us, Mira." The hatch closed with a hiss, sealing the voices and the horror out. The Eclipse lurched as the engines powered up, pulling them away from the artifact and into the safety of the void. But Mira knew it wasn't over. The rift was still there, and now the voices from the black rift were inside her mind. Epilogue. The call weeks passed. The crew tried to move on, to forget, but Mira couldn't. She couldn't forget the faces, the voices, the way the darkness had touched her soul. One night, long after the ship had passed the rift, Mira sat in the observation deck again, staring out into the void. The stars seemed cold, distant, as if they too were lost in the shadows of the black rift. And then, just as she was about to turn away, she heard it again. The signal faint, but unmistakable. "Help us." This time it wasn't a distant echo, it was close. So close, in fact, that she felt it in the deepest corners of her mind. Mira the Rift was calling her back, and now it was her turn to answer. The end.